My name is Noella Forbes, and I'm 27 years old. For most of my life, my parents had a very simple way of explaining me to people. I was the child who would always need help. They didn't always say it cruelly. That was the part that made it harder to argue with. Sometimes, my mother said it with a small, sad smile, like she was protecting me from the embarrassment of being myself. Sometimes my father said it after dinner, with one hand around a glass of water, like he was stating a fact everyone mature enough had already accepted. Noella is sensitive. Noella gets overwhelmed. Noella means well. Noella has never really been good with responsibility. And my brother Callum somehow was always the opposite. Callum was bold. Callum was ambitious. Callum took risks. Callum had vision. When he bought his first condo, my parents called it the beginning of his future. When I rented my first studio apartment, my father asked how long I thought I managed before I needed help. That was the difference. Callum's mistakes were investments. Mine were warnings. By the time I was 27, Callum had 2 luxury condos with floor-to-ceiling windows, a gym in the building, and a parking space he mentioned more often than most people mention their birthdays. My parents had helped with both down payments. They helped with furniture, too. They called it support. I worked double shifts at a medical billing office and a weekend reception job at a dental clinic. I slept in a studio so small I could reach my kitchen sink from the edge of my bed if I leaned far enough. I paid my rent on time. I kept my receipts in a plastic folder under my desk. I had never once asked my parents to save me. Still, at family dinners, my father talked about me like I was a bill he expected to arrive eventually. That night, last month, we were sitting around my parents' dining table. My mother had made roasted chicken and asparagus, the kind of meal she cooked when she wanted things to look peaceful. The good plates were out, the white napkins. The heavy silverware that made every small movement sound formal. Callum sat across from me in a navy sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. He was scrolling through his phone under the table. My father sat at the head where he always sat. My mother kept refilling everyone's water before anyone asked. I remember thinking the room looked calm from the outside. That was how my family worked best. Everything looked calm until you listened. My father was telling Callum about interest rates. Callum had another property deal he was excited about, though I could tell from the way his jaw moved that something about it was not going smoothly. Then my father looked at me. "So, Noella," he said, "how's the little place?" He always called my apartment that. The little place, not my apartment, not my home, the little place. "It's fine," I said. "Still doing both jobs?" my mother asked, her voice soft. "Yes," she sighed, not loudly. "Just enough for everyone to hear concern." "That worries me," she said. "You push yourself too hard." Callum gave a small laugh without looking up. Or maybe she just likes being busy. My father leaned back in his chair. Busy is one thing. Stable is another. I kept my hands folded in my lap. That was something I had learned early. If I touched the fork, they would see my fingers tighten. If I reached for water, they would see my hand shake. So I stayed still. "I'm stable," I said. My father smiled the way he smiled when he wanted me to feel childish for disagreeing. "Noella, sweetheart, stability isn't just surviving month to month, sweetheart." He only called me that when he was about to reduce me. My mother glanced at him, then at me. "Your father just means we've always known you needed a little more guidance." Callum finally looked up. "Come on, Mom, she knows." I looked at him. He shrugged, not even trying to sound unkind. That was almost worse. "What?" he said. "We all know Dad used to say you couldn't even take care of a houseplant." My father's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite denial. I remembered the first time he said it, I was 19. I had forgotten to bring in a basil plant from the porch during a cold snap. He told my aunt right in front of me, "Noella wants independence, but she can't even take care of basil." Everyone laughed. I did too, because I was young enough then to think laughing with them might make it hurt less. At the table, I said nothing. Callum went back to his phone. My father continued, calm as ever. "This is what I mean. You take things personally. Nobody is attacking you. We just know your limits." My limits. That was another word they liked. They had built a whole version of me out of words like that. Sensitive, fragile, limited, dependent. And because I never shouted back, they thought I agreed. Then the knock came. It was sharp and formal, 3 knocks against the front door. My mother frowned. "Are we expecting someone?" My father pushed his chair back with mild irritation. Probably a delivery. He walked out of the dining room. We heard his footsteps cross the entryway. The door opened. A low voice said something I couldn't make out. Then paper shifted, an envelope. I don't know why I knew before I saw it. Maybe it was the way the rooms changed. Maybe it was the way Callum stopped scrolling. Maybe it was because my father did not come back immediately. My mother called, "Raymond." No answer. A few seconds later, he returned holding a sealed envelope. It was cream-colored, thick, official-looking. The kind that makes people sit up straighter before they know why. My father looked annoyed at first. That was his natural response to anything that interrupted his control of a room. He slid one finger under the seal and tore it open. My mother watched him. Callum watched him. I watched his hands. He unfolded the notice. His eyes moved down the page. At first, his expression stayed hard, impatient, almost bored. Then it changed, not dramatically. My father was not a dramatic man. He believed emotion was something other people lost control of. But the color left his face so fast, it looked like someone had turned off a light inside him. His thumb pressed into the edge of the paper. The envelope bent slightly. He read one line again, then another. Then his eyes stopped near the top, where my name was printed, Noella Forbes. Not Callum, not Raymond Forbes, not the family estate me. My mother stood halfway from her chair. "Raymond, what is it?" He did not answer. Callum's phone was face down now. My father looked at me like he had never seen me seated in that room before. Not really. For years, he had looked at me like a problem. That night, for the first time, he looked at me like I was the part of the problem he had forgotten to calculate. I didn't smile. I didn't reach for the notice. I just sat there with my hands folded in my lap, listening to the old dining room clock tick behind him. And I remember thinking very quietly, there it is. Before I tell you why that notice was addressed to me, and why my father looked like my name had just cost him something, I need you to stay with me for the part he never thought mattered. Because to him, this started with property, paperwork, and money. But for me, it started with a blue front door. Now let me take you back. Before my father was afraid of my name, before Callum learned to talk about houses like they were stepping stones, before my mother learned how to make pity sound like love, there was my grandmother, Elise. Her house sat on a quiet street, lined with old maple trees and uneven sidewalks. It was not impressive. Not the way Callum's condos were impressive. There was no marble lobby. No rooftop lounge, no sleek glass balcony overlooking downtown. It was a small house with cream siding, a narrow porch, and a blue front door that stuck in the summer when the wood swelled. The first thing I remember about that house is the smell, lemon polish, old paper, rain in the floorboards. My grandmother kept receipts in cookie tins and birthday candles in a drawer beside the stove. Her kitchen window never opened all the way unless you lifted it from the left side first. The porch steps dipped in the middle. The hallway light flickered when it rained hard. Nothing about it was perfect. But when I walked through that blue door, nobody sighed before saying my name. Nobody looked at me, like I was already disappointing them. Grandma Elise would open the door before I even knocked twice. "There's my girl," she'd say. Not poor Noella, not sensitive Noella, not Noella who needs help, just my girl. I didn't know how much that mattered then. Children don't always know the names of the things saving them. They just know where they can breathe. At my parents' house, I learned to be careful. At Grandma Elise's house, I learned the sound of a chair being pulled out for me before I asked. She let me help in small ways, real ways. She let me measure flour. She let me count change at the grocery store. She let me hold the list and cross things off. When I spilled sugar across the counter, she handed me a cloth instead of making a face. "Try again," she would say. That was all. No lecture, no family joke. No new evidence added to the case against me. One afternoon, when I was maybe 10, it started raining while we were sitting on the porch. Not a storm. Just steady rain, the kind that darkens the steps and makes the world smell clean for a few minutes. I was sitting beside her with my knees pulled up, watching water gather along the edge of the porch roof. Inside, the blue door was still open behind us. I remember asking her why she always painted it the same color. She looked at it for a while before answering. Then she said, "A person needs one door in this world that opens without them having to prove they deserve it." I didn't fully understand. Not then. I just knew her voice got softer when she said it. And I knew that for me, that door was hers. I was too young to understand that love could be practical. I thought love was supposed to look like the things my parents talked about. Big sacrifices, big decisions, money when it mattered. Advice delivered at the dining table in a voice that made you feel smaller. But Grandma Elise's love was smaller than that. It was a chair pulled out before I stood there awkwardly. It was a towel waiting by the back door when Rain caught me walking home from the corner store. It was her saying, "Read that back to me, sweetheart," when she let me help her sort bills, not because she needed help, but because she wanted me to feel trusted. She never made trust feel like a reward. That was the difference. At my parents' house, trust was something Callum received before he earned it. For me, it was something always being delayed. When Callum was 8, he broke the glass panel in our back door because he tried to kick a soccer ball through a hula hoop he had taped to the frame. My father came home, saw the broken glass, and stared at it for a long second. Then Callum said, "I almost made it," and my father laughed, not a forced laugh, a real one. "That's ambition," he said, rubbing Callum's hair. Bad aim, but ambition. The next week, when I was rinsing paintbrushes in the laundry sink and left a pale blue streak along the porcelain, my father stood over it like I had damaged something important. "Noella," he said, tired already, "you have to think before you do things." I remember looking down at the sink. The mark was small. It came off with baking soda later, but the way he said my name stayed longer than the paint. Callum was a boy who tried things. I was a girl who should have known better. That was how it began, I think. Not with one terrible moment. Just little weights placed on different sides of the scale until everyone forgot the scale was crooked. My mother helped with it in quieter ways. She was never as sharp as my father. She did not raise her voice much. She moved gently through rooms, touching shoulders, smoothing collars, asking if people had eaten. But sometimes gentleness can still press down on you. When relatives came over, she would place a hand on my back and say, "Noella gets overwhelmed when there are too many people. Don't you, honey?" I would be standing there with a plate of cookies in my hands, not overwhelmed at all. But once she said it, I became that girl in the room, the overwhelmed one. The one people lowered their voices around. The one nobody asked to help carry the heavy dishes because you know how she gets. I did not know how I got. I only knew how they said I got. Callum moved through those same rooms like air belonged to him. If he interrupted adults, my father called him confident. If I waited too long to answer a question, my mother would smile apologetically and say, "She's shy." Sometimes Callum used to answer for me. "She doesn't know," he would say, even when I did, especially when I did. At Grandma Elise's house, that did not happen. If she asked me a question, she waited. She would sit across from me at the little yellow kitchen table, one elbow near the sugar bowl, the morning light falling across her sleeve, and she would wait like my answer was worth the time it took to find it. "What do you think, Noella?" Those were 5 simple words. But no one else in my family asked them, like they expected something useful to come back. One Saturday, she was paying bills at the table, and I sat beside her sorting envelopes into piles. Electric, water, insurance, property tax. She had a small calculator with soft gray buttons and a notebook where she wrote everything down in neat columns. I liked the order of it. I liked the way numbers stayed where you put them. "Can I try?" I asked. She slid the notebook toward me. I added the figures slowly, whispering each number under my breath. I got it wrong the first time. My face went hot before she even said anything. I was already waiting for the sigh. But Grandma Elise only tapped the second line with her pen. "Start here again," she said. "You skipped one. No disappointment. No joke. No warning that this proved something about me." I started again. This time, I got it right. She smiled and tore a small corner off an old envelope for a bookmark. "See," she said. "Careful is not the same as incapable." I did not answer. I just looked at the page. Careful is not the same as incapable. I carried that sentence for years before I knew I was carrying it. At home, careful meant timid. At school, careful meant slow. With my father, careful meant I needed more guidance. With Grandma Elise, careful meant I was paying attention. There were other things too, small things. At family barbecues, my father let Callum stand beside him at the grill, turning burgers while smoke curled into the yard. "A man needs to know how to manage fire and money," he told him once, laughing. I was sitting on the back steps, tying my shoelace. "What about me?" I asked. My father glanced over. You don't need to worry about that. Why not? Because you worry enough already. Everyone smiled like it was affectionate. I smiled too. That was another habit I learned young. Smile quickly and people move on. But that night, in bed, I wondered what money had to do with Callum and not with me. I wondered why responsibility seemed to belong to him before he had even done anything responsible. The first time Callum got a bank card, my father took him to open the account and bought him lunch afterward. He came home with a little paper folder from the bank and dropped it on the kitchen counter like a trophy. When I turned the same age and asked about opening one, my mother said, maybe wait until your father has time to go with you. Those things can be confusing. They were not confusing. I had read the brochure, but I waited anyway. I waited a lot back then. I waited for someone to ask what I knew before assuming what I did not. I waited for my father to teach me something without making it sound like a favor. I waited for my mother to say just once, she can handle it. She never did. Not exactly. What she said was, Noella tries so hard. That was her favorite sentence about me. It sounded kind from far away. Up close, it meant effort was the best anyone could expect from me. Grandma Elise heard it once. We were at my parents' house for Sunday lunch. I was 12, maybe 13. My aunt had asked if I wanted to help arrange flowers for the table, and before I could answer, my mother said, let Callum carry the vase. Noella tries so hard, but she gets nervous with breakable things. I remember Grandma Elise looking at me. Not at my mother, at me. She did not correct her in front of everyone. That was not her way. She waited until later, when we were drying plates in the kitchen, and the others were outside. She handed me a glass serving bowl, a heavy one. Put that on the top shelf for me, she said. I froze for half a second. She noticed. Both hands, she said. So I took it with both hands and placed it carefully on the shelf. Nothing broke. Grandma Elise gave me a dish towel. There, she said, that was all. But it felt like she had handed me back a piece of myself. I think she saw more than she said. When my father spoke over me, she watched his face. When my mother made excuses for me, before I had failed, Grandma Elise's mouth would tighten just a little. When Callum bragged and everyone laughed, she laughed too, but her eyes always found me afterward, like she was checking whether I had disappeared. I had not disappeared, not completely, but I was learning how. I became useful in quiet ways. I remembered birthdays. I rinsed plates without being asked. I knew where my mother kept extra napkins and where my father left his reading glasses. I learned that being low maintenance made people less likely to talk about my limits. At school, I kept my homework neat. At home, I kept my room clean. At Grandma Elise's house, I labeled the spice jars because she said her eyes were not as sharp as they used to be. You've got a steady hand, she told me. At home, my father called that same steadiness nervousness. It is strange how the same part of you can be named two different ways, depending on who wants power over it. When I was 15, Grandma Elise gave me a key to her house. It was on a small brass ring with a blue tag shaped like a door. She pressed it into my palm while we stood in her kitchen. There was soup on the stove, and the window was fogged from the steam. Rain tapped softly against the glass. For emergencies, I asked. For belonging, she said. I laughed a little, because I did not know what to do with the seriousness in her voice. She closed my fingers around it. You don't have to use it, she said. Just know it works. I kept that key in the back pocket of my school bag. I never told my parents. Not because it was a secret exactly, but because I knew they would turn it into something else. My mother would say it was sweet but unnecessary. My father would say Grandma Elise was encouraging dependence. Callum would probably ask if he got one too, so I kept it. Sometimes, when my father corrected me for something small, I would go upstairs later and open my bag just to look at the blue tag. Just know it works. That mattered more than I could admit. Years passed that way, quietly. Not happily, not miserably. Just in that strange middle place where a child learns to accept the shape of a room because she has never been allowed to move the furniture. Callum got louder, more charming, more certain. My father started talking to him about credit and investments before Callum had a job. My mother started saying things like, your brother has such big plans, while looking at me with a different kind of softness. And you, she would add, touching my arm, you just need to find something manageable. Manageable. That word sat beside limits, beside sensitive, beside guidance. By the time I was old enough to understand the pattern, I was already inside it. Then Grandma Elise got sick. Not all at once, that would have been easier to name. It started with smaller things, forgotten appointments, a kettle left on too long, a stack of mail unopened by the fruit bowl. My parents talked about it in practical tones: doctors, insurance, arrangements. My father used the word arrangements often. It made everything sound already decided. I went to her house after school and helped where I could. I wrote appointment dates on the calendar. I sorted medication bottles by morning and evening. I cleaned the kitchen window with vinegar because she said. Streaks annoyed her. Some days she was herself. Some days she was tired. One afternoon, she sat at the kitchen table with a folder open in front of her. When I walked in, she closed it gently, not fast enough to seem secretive, but not slowly enough to be nothing. I noticed I did not ask. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "People show you what they value when they think no one is keeping record." I thought she was talking about bills. Maybe she was, maybe she wasn't. A month later, she was gone. The funeral was small and gray. It rained that morning, the same steady kind of rain that used to fall while we sat on her porch. I stood beside my mother under a black umbrella that kept slipping in the wind. My shoes sank slightly into the wet grass. People hugged me and told me Grandma Elise loved me very much. I nodded because if I tried to speak, I knew I would lose control of my face. Callum looked uncomfortable in his suit. My father looked tired. My mother cried softly into a tissue and leaned against him. Afterward, everyone went back to my parents' house for coffee and sandwiches. I remember sitting on the edge of the sofa with a paper plate in my lap, egg salad, grapes, a square of pound cake I did not eat. Adults spoke in low voices around me. Someone mentioned Grandma Elisa's house. My father answered before anyone else could. "We'll handle the house," he said. He was standing near the fireplace with one hand in his pocket, calm and certain. Then he looked briefly in my direction. "Noella doesn't need to worry about things like that." No one reacted. Not my mother. Not Callum. Not the relatives balancing coffee cups and whispering about how sad it all was. I looked down at my paper plate and pressed my fork into the edge of the pound cake. At the time, I thought he meant grief. I thought he meant repairs, bills, adult paperwork. Things people were always telling me were too much for me, so I said nothing. But years later, when that sealed envelope arrived at my parents' front door and my father saw my name printed on the notice, I would remember that exact moment. His voice by the fireplace, the rain on the windows, the blue key still hidden in my old school bag. And the way he had said handle, like the house had already become something to take from my hands before I even knew I was holding it. After Grandma Elise died, my life got quieter in a way I did not know how to explain. It was not just that I missed her. I did miss her. I missed the sound of her kettle clicking off. I missed the little cough she made before answering the phone. I missed the way she would lick her finger before turning a page, even when the page was glossy and did not need it. But more than that, I missed having one place where I did not have to prepare myself before entering. At my parents' house, I prepared. I checked my face before walking into a room. I kept my voice even. I made sure not to look tired because tired became overwhelmed. I made sure not to look too rested because rested became lazy. I learned to answer questions with just enough detail to avoid follow-ups. When I moved out, I thought some of that would stop. It didn't. My first apartment was not really an apartment. It was a studio above a dry cleaner with a window that faced the brick wall of the building next door. The heat clanged at night. The bathroom sink dripped unless I turned the handle at the right angle. The refrigerator made a soft clicking noise every few hours, like it was thinking about giving up. But it was mine. I signed the lease myself. I read every page twice. I circled the deposit amount, the late fee policy, the maintenance number, the trash schedule. I bought a cheap black binder and put everything inside it in plastic sleeves: lease, receipts, pay stubs, electric bill, internet bill, copies of my ID. I remember sitting cross-legged on the floor that first night, eating noodles from a paper bowl because I did not own a table yet. The room smelled like fresh paint and someone else's old cooking oil. My mattress was still wrapped in plastic against the wall. I should have felt embarrassed. I didn't. I felt tired mostly, but under the tiredness, there was a small, steady feeling, a key in my hand, a door that opened because I paid for it. When my mother came to see it, she stood in the middle of the room with her purse still on her shoulder. "Oh, honey," she said. That was all. 2 words, soft enough to sound kind. My father looked around and checked the ceiling, the outlet covers, the lock on the door. "You're sure this is manageable?" he asked. There was that word again. Manageable. I told him yes. He nodded slowly, like he wanted to believe me, but experience had taught him not to. Callum came later and leaned against the doorway without stepping fully inside. "It's tiny," he said. "It's enough," I answered. He smiled. For now, for now." People said things like that to me often. They said them casually, but they always carried a little prediction inside. I started working at a medical billing office during the week. It was not glamorous. I spent most of my day matching codes to insurance claims, correcting names, checking birth dates, calling patients who were already upset before they heard my voice. On Saturdays, I worked reception at a dental clinic where the waiting room smelled like mint and latex gloves. I kept a calendar taped inside my cabinet door, blue pen for billing shifts, green pen for clinic shifts, red circles around rent due dates. Every other Friday, I sat on the edge of my bed and divided my paycheck on paper before touching the banking app. Rent, utilities, phone, bus pass, groceries, emergency fund. Sometimes the emergency fund was $12, sometimes it was $7. I still wrote it down. Careful is not the same as incapable. I did not say that out loud. I did not even think it in Grandma Elise's voice every time, but it was there, in the columns, in the receipts, in the way I kept going even when nobody saw it as strength. My parents saw something different. "You're working too much," my mother said one Sunday when I came by after a clinic shift. "I'm paying bills." "Yes, but you look worn down." "I'm just tired." "That's what I mean." She said it like tiredness proved her point. My father was sitting at the kitchen table reading something on his tablet. He did not look up. "Survival mode isn't stability," he said. I opened my mouth, then closed it. There was no answer that would not become a new problem. If I said I was stable, I was defensive. If I admitted I was tired, I was proving them right. So I rinsed my coffee cup and placed it carefully in the dishwasher. A few months later, Callum bought his first condo. My parents invited everyone over for dinner to celebrate. They called it a milestone. My mother made salmon with lemon butter. My father opened wine, the good kind he saved for promotions and anniversaries. Callum arrived late, grinning with a folder under his arm. He spread the listing photos across the dining table. Floor-to-ceiling windows, quartz countertops, a rooftop terrace with string lights, a gym on the 3rd floor. Everyone leaned in. My father tapped one of the photos. "This is how you start building equity." Callum nodded like he had discovered fire. My mother touched his shoulder. "We're so proud of you." I stood beside the sideboard, holding a stack of plates. For a second, I thought about my own lease binder on the floor beside my bed. The plastic sleeves, the rent receipts, the careful little emergency fund. No one had called that a milestone. Later that night, in the kitchen, my aunt asked how Callum had managed such a nice place so young. My mother lowered her voice, but not enough. "Well, we helped him get started," she said. "Just a little." Just a little turned out to be most of the down payment. I found that out by accident, not from them. Callum told a cousin at Thanksgiving, laughing, that Dad had bridged the gap because banks make everything dramatic. My father heard him and did not correct him. He only said, "You support potential when you see it." I was standing at the sink, scraping gravy from a plate. Support potential. That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. The next year, when my building changed management, they required updated references for lease renewal. Nothing serious, just a form, a signature, someone confirming I paid on time and was employed. I called my father because I thought it was small enough not to become humiliating. He answered on speaker. I could hear a basketball game in the background. "What do you need?" he asked. I explained. There was a pause. "You want me to sign something for your rent?" "It's just a reference." "Noella." My name came out tired before he even finished the thought. "I pay on time," I said. "They just changed their process. You're 23. You need to stand on your own feet." I remember looking down at the form on my lap. The blank line for reference contact. The little box for relationship to applicant. "I am standing on my own feet," I said. He sighed. "That's not what this looks like." I did not ask again. I used my supervisor at the billing office instead. She signed it during lunch while eating yogurt at her desk. "Landlords are annoying," she said, handing it back. That was all it took. No lecture. No family meeting. No reminder of my limits. When I told my mother later that the lease was renewed, she sounded relieved in a way that hurt. "Oh, good," she said. "I was worried you'd gotten yourself into a situation. My rent was paid, my utilities were current, my fridge had eggs, rice, and half a bag of spinach. But in my family, my life was always one step away from becoming evidence." Callum's second condo came 2 years after the first. By then, he had learned how to speak like my father: equity, leverage, market timing, asset class. He said these words at dinners while my mother smiled like each one proved something about him. The second condo had a concierge desk and a view of the river. My parents helped again. They called it temporary support. They paid for some renovations too, because Callum said the kitchen needed to match the kind of tenants he wanted. When I asked my mother quietly if they were comfortable helping him that much, she looked wounded. "Why would you ask it like that? I'm not trying to be rude. It sounds like jealousy, Noella." There it was. The door closing. "I'm just asking. He has a plan," she said. "Your brother is trying to build something." I wanted to say, "So am I." I wanted to say, "I build something every month when I pay rent before buying groceries." I wanted to say, "I built myself without making it your emergency." But I only nodded. My mother softened then, which somehow made it worse. "You're doing your best, too." That small word placed me exactly where she thought I belonged, behind him, below him, trying. At family gatherings, my father began giving updates on both of us, as if we were investments with different returns. "Callum's expanding his portfolio," he would say. Then, with a glance toward me, "Noella is still at her little place, working hard, doing her best." People would smile at me with that same careful kindness. I learned to smile back. I learned to make my face easy. The strangest part was that I almost believed them sometimes. On nights when I came home from the dental clinic with sore feet and a microwave dinner, I would stand in my little kitchen and wonder if maybe stability did look different from this. Maybe it did have balconies and countertops and parents who wrote checks without turning them into lessons. Then I would open my desk drawer. Inside, beneath my rent binder, I still kept the old blue tagged key. The tag was scuffed by then. The brass had darkened, but the key still fit against my palm the same way. Just know it works. I had not used it in years. After Grandma Elise died, my father had taken over everything connected to the house. Or at least that was how he made it sound. Taxes, repairs, insurance, paperwork. He spoke of it rarely, and when he did, it was with the exhausted tone of a man carrying a burden no one else could understand. "The old place needs maintenance," he said once. My mother sighed. "Your grandmother never liked throwing anything away." Callum laughed. "That house is sitting on a decent lot, isn't it?" My father looked at him, then back at his plate. "It's in a good area," he said. Something in the room shifted, not enough for anyone to name. Just enough for me to notice. Callum leaned back in his chair. "Honestly, if Gran's place was used properly, it could solve a lot of problems." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. My mother kept cutting her chicken into small pieces. My father did not say, "That was your grandmother's home." He did not say, "Be respectful." He did not say, "It isn't yours to discuss." He only reached for his water and took a slow drink. And in that silence, I heard something I would not understand until much later. The house with the blue door had stopped being a place in their minds. It had become an answer. 2 weeks after that dinner, the first strange letter arrived. It came on a day, folded into the bottom of my mailbox beneath a grocery flyer and my electric bill. I remember because Thursdays were my long days. Medical billing from 8 to 5. Then the dental clinic until 8:30 because someone had called out. By the time I got home, my feet hurt in that deep way where even taking off your shoes does not fix it. I carried the mail upstairs with my keys between my fingers and my tote bag, digging into my shoulder. The hallway smelled like detergent from the dry cleaner below. Someone's television murmured behind a door. Inside my studio, I dropped everything on the little counter beside the sink and made toast, because toast was the fastest thing that felt almost like dinner. Then I opened the mail standing up: electric bill, a pharmacy coupon, a notice about pest control inspections, and one envelope I did not recognize. It had my name on it, but not my apartment address in the usual way. Below my name was a reference line: property inquiry, 14 Wexley Lane. Grandma Lisa's address. I stood very still. The toast popped up behind me and made me jump. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake. Maybe a tax notice had been forwarded wrong. Maybe my name was on an old mailing list because I had helped Grandma Elise with errands years ago. Maybe Raymond had put me down as a contact for something without thinking. That last thought bothered me more than the others. I sat on the edge of my bed and opened the envelope carefully so I would not tear the letterhead. The language was plain enough at first. Title review, preliminary inquiry, potential refinancing action, occupancy and beneficiary confirmation. I read it once and understood almost nothing. Then I read it again. On the second read, certain words seemed to rise off the page. Raymond Forbes, Callum Forbes. Pending application, collateral review. I put the letter down beside me. My apartment was quiet, except for the refrigerator clicking in the corner. I remember looking at the wall across from my bed, the blank off-white wall with one small nail hole left by a tenant before me, and thinking, no. Not because I knew what it meant. Because I did not want it to mean anything. I worked with documents all day, claims, insurance forms, codes, corrections. People think paperwork is dry, but paperwork has a tone if you read enough of it. Some letters are informational. Some are warnings. Some are written like someone is trying to create a record before a problem gets worse. This one had that feeling, a record. I folded it back into the envelope and put it inside my black binder, behind my lease. Then I washed my plate. Then I took it out and read it again. That was when I noticed the date. The inquiry had been initiated 3 days after the dinner, where Callum said Grandma Elise's house could solve a lot of problems. I did not sleep much that night. I did not call my father. That part matters. The old version of me would have called him, not to accuse him, but to make the uncomfortable feeling stop. I would have let him explain it away. He would have said, Noella, you're misunderstanding something. My mother would have said, this is exactly why we don't tell you everything at once. And by the end of the call, somehow I would be apologizing for being confused by a letter with my own name on it. So I did not call. The next morning, before work, I made a copy at the pharmacy on the corner. The copier glass had smudges on it, and the machine made a grinding sound like it resented every page. I copied the envelope too, front and back. Then I put the copies in a new folder, blue. I did not choose the color on purpose at first. It was just the folder left in the pack after I used the others for rent, medical, and taxes. But when I slid the letter inside, I thought of the blue tag on Grandma Elise's key. Just know it works. After that, I started paying attention differently. Raymond had always said he was handling the house, taxes, repairs, insurance, paperwork. I realized I had accepted that word for years without asking what handling meant. So I started with public records. Nothing dramatic. Just a laptop on my knees after work, a mug of tea cooling beside me, the city property portal open in a browser window. I typed in 14 Wexley Lane and waited while the page loaded. The house appeared in plain black text. Parcel number, assessed value, tax year, mailing address, owner information was not simple. It listed something I did not expect. Elise M. Forbes Residential Trust. I read those words 3 times. Trust, not Raymond Forbes, not estate of Elise Forbes, not Forbes family property, a trust. I did not know enough to understand it, but I knew enough to know it mattered. The next day, I used my lunch break to call the county recorder's office. I stood outside behind the billing office near the dumpsters because the reception area was too loud. A woman with a tired voice answered. I asked how to request documents for a property. She told me the form number, the fee, the email address, and how long copies usually took. Do you need certified copies? She asked. I don't know yet, I said. There was a pause. Start with regular, she said. Cheaper. I wrote that down on the back of an old claim note. Regular copies first. Cheaper. The world did not stop while I learned these things. That was one of the strangest parts. I still went to work. I still answered phones at the dental clinic. I still reminded patients that insurance estimates were not guarantees. I still bought rice and spinach and store-brand coffee. I still smiled when my mother texted, "Hope you're not overdoing it." But under everything, there was a new thread pulling tight. A week later, the recorder's office emailed the documents. I opened them on my phone between shifts and immediately regretted it because the print was too small and my hands were too cold. I waited until I got home. Then I sat on the floor with my laptop open, the blue folder beside me, and Grandma Elise's key lying on top of the binder. The trust document was long, longer than I expected. A lot of it sounded formal and repetitive. Whereas hurrying after trustee, beneficiary, real property, successor, provisions, I moved slowly. I wrote down words I did not know. I searched definitions. I read paragraphs twice. Then I found my name, Noella Marie Forbes. My mouth went dry. It was not a casual mention. It was not an emergency contact. It was not a sentimental note. My name was written into the document, as if Grandma Elise had sat somewhere, held a pen, and made sure no one could pretend she had forgotten me. The trust named Raymond as an initial administrative trustee after her death, but only for maintenance and preservation. That phrase appeared more than once. Maintenance and preservation, not sale, not refinancing, not transfer. Then, farther down, there was a clause about final beneficiary rights transferring when I reached 27. I had turned 27 3 months earlier. I remember putting both hands flat on the floor. The room seemed too small for the information. For years, my father had spoken about the house, like it was a burden he carried, because no one else could. For years, I had believed I was outside the adult part of the story, too sensitive for paperwork, too unstable for responsibility, too small for decisions. But Grandma Elise had written my name into the center of it. I did not cry right away. I just sat there while the refrigerator clicked. Then I picked up the key. The blue tag was worn almost smooth on one side. I pressed my thumb against it and thought about that afternoon in her kitchen, soup on the stove, rain on the window. For belonging, she had said. Not for emergencies, for belonging. The next Saturday, I went to the house. I had avoided it for years because I did not trust myself to walk through the door and find it changed. Or worse, find it exactly the same. The street looked smaller than I remembered. The maple trees were taller. The sidewalk still lifted near the corner where roots had pushed through the concrete. There were weeds along the fence line. The porch needed paint, and the blue door had faded. Not gone, just tired, like something that had waited too long in the sun. I stood there with the key in my hand for almost a full minute before I used it. It worked. The lock turned with a stiff little click. Inside, the air was cool and still. It smelled faintly of old paper and dust, but beneath that so faint I almost imagined it, lemon polish. I closed the door behind me and listened. No kettle, no radio. No chair scraping back from the kitchen table. Just the quiet of a house that had kept its shape without the person who made it warm. I walked room to room carefully. The furniture was covered in sheets. The kitchen window still stuck when I tried to lift it. On the counter sat an empty glass jar with a blue rubber band around it. Grandma Elise had used jars for everything: buttons, coins, receipts. In the back room, the small desk was still there. The drawers were mostly empty, old warranty cards, a dried pen, a box of paper clips. But in the bottom drawer, tucked behind a stack of appliance manuals, I found a folder. Not the one she had closed that afternoon years ago. At least I did not think so. This one was labeled in her handwriting. For Noella, when needed. I sat down slowly. Inside were copies, the trust summary, the deed transfer into the trust, a letter from an attorney, property tax receipts, insurance renewals, and one handwritten note on lined paper. Noella, if you are reading this, remember that careful is not the same as incapable. That was when I cried, not loudly, just enough that I had to press the heel of my hand against my mouth. Because she had known. Maybe not everything. Maybe not every dinner, every comment, every moment when my mother softened my humiliation into concern. But enough. Enough to build something around me before I understood what needed protecting. I took photos of every page. Then I put the originals back exactly where I found them, except for the handwritten note. I folded that and placed it in the blue folder with the copies. On Monday, I went to a legal aid clinic during my lunch break. The waiting room had gray chairs, a water cooler, and a sign asking people to silence their phones. I sat with my folder on my lap and watched a man across from me fill out a form using his knee as a table. When they called my name, I followed a woman into a small office with a desk covered in stacked files. She introduced herself as Ms. Alvarez. I handed her the documents and tried to explain without making it sound emotional. My father has been handling my grandmother's house, I said. But I got this letter. And I found these, she read quietly. I watched her eyes move across the pages. Every few minutes, she wrote something on a yellow legal pad. "Did you sign anything?" she asked. "No." "Did you give verbal permission for a refinance or lien?" "No." "Have they asked you to?" "No." She looked up then. That was the first moment I saw concern on her face. Not pity, concern. There is a difference. She turned one page around and tapped the clause with her pen. "Ms. Forbes," she said, "based on what you've brought me, no one can use that house without your consent. Not for collateral, not for refinancing, not for transfer. Not if this trust is still in effect the way it appears to be." I stared at the paragraph. My name was right there, plain, unmoved. "And if they already started something," I asked, "then it needs to be stopped." My phone buzzed before I could answer. It was on the desk beside the folder, face up. A message from my mother lit the screen. "Your father wants everyone at dinner Sunday. It's about the house." For a moment, neither of us moved. Ms. Alvarez glanced at the phone, then back at me. I turned it face down, but the words were already inside the room. "It's about the house." I did not answer my mother's text right away. I sat in Miss Alvarez's office with my phone face down beside the blue folder, and for a few seconds all I could hear was the faint hum of the fluorescent light above us. "It's about the house." Those 4 words felt too simple for what they were carrying. Miss Alvarez did not ask who had texted. She only slid the documents back into a neat stack and tapped the top page with her pen. "Before Sunday," she said, "make copies of everything. Keep one set somewhere outside your apartment if you can. And don't sign anything without review." I nodded. My throat felt tight, but my hands were steady enough to put the pages back in order. She wrote down 2 things on a yellow sticky note: "County Recorder, Trust Administrator Contact." Then she paused, and "Miss Forbes," I looked up. "If they pressure you, you don't have to explain everything in the moment." That stayed with me. You don't have to explain everything in the moment. For most of my life, I had explained too much. I explained why I was tired, why I was quiet, why I had chosen the studio, why I worked weekends, why I did not visit more, why I visited at all. Explaining had never made them understand me better. It had only given them more places to press. That afternoon, I went back to work with the blue folder tucked inside my tote bag under my lunch container and a rolled cardigan. I answered patient calls. I corrected a billing code. I explained to a man named Patrick that his insurance denial was not the same thing as a final balance. All ordinary things, but every time I reached into my bag for a pen, my fingers brushed the folder. Paper can feel heavier once you know what it means. After work, I did not go straight home. I went to the copy shop 2 streets from the bus stop. It was a narrow place with humming machines and a college student at the counter, eating chips from a small bag. I fed bills into a copier and made 3 sets of everything: the property inquiry letter, the trust summary, the deed transfer, the attorney letter, the page with my name, the clause about maintenance and preservation, the handwritten note from Grandma Elise. I copied that last one slower than the others. The machine light moved under the glass and caught the uneven pressure of her handwriting, the places where the pen had pressed harder. Careful is not the same as incapable. I stood there watching the copy slide out into the tray, warm and flat, and had the strange thought that my grandmother's voice had become evidence. I put 1 set in the blue folder. 1 set went into a large envelope I planned to keep at work in my locked drawer. 1 set I mailed to myself by certified mail because Miss Alvarez said sometimes a paper trail mattered more than people expected. The clerk asked if I wanted tracking. "Yes," I said. He handed me a receipt. I folded it and put it behind my debit card. That night, in my studio, I ate cereal for dinner because I was too tired to cook. My phone stayed on the counter. It rang at 8:17, Dad. I looked at the screen until it stopped. Then it rang again. I let that one stop too. A minute later, a text came in. "Call me." "No, please." No question mark, just instruction. I waited 5 minutes before typing back. "I'm working through some things. Sunday is fine." The 3 dots appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, he called. This time I answered. "Noella," he said. Not hello, just my name, already shaped like correction. "Hi, Dad. Your mother tells me she texted you." "She did. We need to talk like adults." I looked at the blue folder on my desk. The corner of Grandma Elise's note stuck out just enough for me to see the first line. "Okay," he exhaled through his nose. I could picture him standing in the kitchen, one hand on his hip, phone pressed to his ear, the posture he used when someone was wasting time. There are decisions to make about your grandmother's house. What kind of decisions? A short silence. The responsible kind. I waited. He did not like waiting. He liked filling silence before anyone else could use it. The property has been sitting there for years, he said. Taxes, maintenance, insurance. These things don't handle themselves. I looked around my studio. My rent calendar was taped inside the cabinet door. My electric bill was due on the 15th. My work shoes were by the door with the toes scuffed white. No, I said. They don't. His voice softened in a way that was not softness. You may not understand all the moving pieces here. There it was. Not anger, not yet. Just the old doorway being built around me again. I understand there are moving pieces, I said. That's why Sunday matters. We'll explain. We'll explain. Not discuss, explain. I said, I'll be there. He seemed almost surprised that I did not argue. Good, he said. And Noella? Yes, try not to make this emotional. I looked down at the trust documents. The house where my grandmother had waited for my answer. The key she gave me for belonging. The note she left because she knew I would need to remember myself. Okay, I said. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet for a while. Then I wrote the sentence down. Try not to make this emotional. I did not know why at first. It just felt like something I should keep. The next morning, my mother called while I was walking to the bus. The sky was low and gray, and the sidewalk smelled like wet leaves. Sweetheart, she said, your father told me you sounded tense. I'm fine. That's what you always say. A bus hissed at the curb ahead of me. I stepped around a puddle. What did you need, Mom? She went quiet for half a second. Not long. Just enough. I want Sunday to go smoothly. So do I. Callum is under a lot of pressure. I stopped walking. People moved around me toward the bus doors. What kind of pressure? Oh, you know, Callum. Always taking on big things. I could hear dishes clinking in the background. She was probably unloading the dishwasher. My mother liked doing ordinary chores during uncomfortable phone calls. It made her sound calmer than she was. He has responsibilities, she continued. And your father has been trying to help keep everything from becoming more stressful. I got on the bus and found a seat near the back. The window was cold against my shoulder. What does that have to do with me? She sighed softly. Don't start like that. I'm asking. It's family, Noella. Not everything has to be divided into yours and mine. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because for years, everything had been divided. Callum's needs were investments, mine were burdens. Callum's pressure was ambition, mine was instability. But I only said, I understand. She took that as agreement, good. And please, don't come in defensive. Your father has handled that house for years, handled. The word moved through me like a draft under a door. I know, I said, my mother's voice warmed. We just don't want you overwhelmed by things that are bigger than you realize. The bus pulled away from the curb. I watched my reflection shake in the window. For the first time, I did not feel smaller when she said it. I felt warned. Callum texted that afternoon. Not a greeting, just a message. Mom says you're being weird about Sunday. I did not answer. A second message came. Look, nobody's taking your memories. It's a house. You don't even live there. I read that one twice. Then a third. Some of us are trying to build something real. That was the closest anyone had come to saying what they meant. I put my phone face down on my desk and finished entering a claim appeal. When my shift ended, I went back to Grandma Elisa's house, not because I needed more documents, because I needed to stand somewhere that had not been renamed by them yet. The blue door looked dull in the late afternoon light. A small curl of paint had lifted near the bottom panel. I ran my thumb over it before unlocking the door. Inside, the house was colder than before. I walked to the kitchen and opened the window the way she had taught me. Lift from the left side first. The wood resisted, then gave a little. Outside, leaves scraped along the path. I checked the back room again. The originals were still in the drawer. I took photographs of the drawer, the folder, the labels, the desk. Not because I expected anyone to break in, because I was learning that proof mattered. On the kitchen table, I spread my copies into piles: trust, property records, inquiry letter, legal notes, personal. The handwritten note stayed under my palm. I thought about calling my father from that table. I thought about asking him directly. Did you start a refinance? Did Callum use the house as collateral? Were you going to tell me? But I could hear his answers before he gave them. You're misunderstanding. This is why we wanted to talk in person. You always assume the worst. You're making this harder than it has to be. So I did not call. Instead, I wrote questions in a notebook. What was filed? Who authorized it? What deadline exists? What does Callum need? Why now? At the bottom of the page, without planning to, I wrote, what did Grandma know? The next 2 days moved slowly. Raymond texted twice, Sunday 6 o'clock, then bring an open mind. My mother sent a longer message. I know this is sensitive for you, but please remember your brother is family too. Your grandmother would want us united. Callum sent nothing else. That worried me more. By Sunday afternoon, I had slept badly for 3 nights. My body felt light and heavy at the same time. I ironed the only blouse I owned that still looked formal, pale blue. I almost changed when I noticed the color, then decided not to. I placed the copied documents in a plain manila envelope, not the originals, never the originals. The blue folder stayed in my studio, tucked inside the black binder beneath my lease papers. Grandma Elise's handwritten note stayed there too. I did not want it on my parents' dining table. Not yet. Before leaving, I checked my bag twice, phone, keys, envelope, notebook. Certified mail receipt, bus card. Then I opened the desk drawer and looked at the blue-tagged key. I did not need it that night. Still, I picked it up and held it for a moment, just know it works. The ride to my parents' neighborhood took 34 minutes. I knew because I watched the bus clock at every red light. Their street looked the same as always. Trim lawns, porch lights, cars washed on weekends. Houses with windows that glowed warm enough to make you think everyone inside was kind to each other. Callum's SUV was parked in the driveway, black, polished, too large for the space. My father's car was beside it. My mother had turned on the porch light, even though it was not fully dark yet. That small thing made my stomach tighten. She did that when she wanted a house to look welcoming, when she wanted what happened inside to seem softer from the outside. I stood at the foot of the walkway with the envelope in my bag and looked at the front door. Not blue, dark green glossy, perfectly painted. I remembered Grandma Elise's voice on the porch years ago, rain tapping the roof, her blue door open behind us. A person needs one door in this world that opens without them having to prove they deserve it. This was not that door. I walked up the steps anyway. Before I could knock, the door opened. My mother was the one who opened it. She had lipstick on, the muted rose color she wore when she wanted to look calm. Her hair was pinned back. She smiled before I had even stepped inside. There you are, she said. Not hello, not how was the ride. Just there you are, like I was late to something already in progress. I stepped into the entryway and took off my coat. The house smelled like roasted vegetables and furniture polish. Soft music played from the living room speaker. It was the kind of setting my mother made, when she wanted tension to look like dinner. Hi, Mom. She kissed my cheek, but her hand stayed on my shoulder a second too long. Let's have a peaceful evening, she whispered. I nodded. Behind her, I could see the dining room. The table was already set. 4 places, no extra relatives, which should have made me feel better. It didn't. The chairs had been positioned too neatly. My father sat at the head of the table with a folder beside his plate. Callum sat across from the empty chair meant for me, one knee bouncing under the table. His phone was face down near his water glass. Nobody looked surprised to see me. They looked ready. I placed my bag on the floor beside my chair, close enough that my ankle touched it when I sat down. The manila envelope was inside, under my notebook. My father looked at the bag, then at me. You brought paperwork? Just a notebook, I said. That was not a lie, it just was not all of it. Callum gave a short laugh. Of course you did. My mother sat down quickly, as if sitting could stop the tone from changing. Let's eat first, she said, but nobody really ate. My father cut one piece of chicken, moved it across his plate, and set his knife down. Callum drank half his water in one go. My mother kept smoothing the napkin across her lap. I waited. For once, I did not fill the silence. My father finally leaned back. All right, he said. We should talk. The sentence landed exactly the way I expected. Calm adult, already decided. I folded my hands beneath the table. He opened his folder. This is about your grandmother's house. I looked at the folder. Not mine, his dark gray. Expensive looking, the kind with a magnetic flap. Okay, my father glanced at my mother, then back at me. The property has been sitting unused for too long. It isn't practical. Marlene reached for her water. No one is saying it isn't meaningful, sweetheart. Callum shifted in his chair. But meaningful doesn't pay taxes. I looked at him. He looked back like he had been waiting to say that. My father continued, "Your mother and I have discussed this at length. The responsible thing is to make use of the asset. The asset. Not the house, not Mom's house. Not Elise's home, the asset. What does make use mean?" I asked. My father's mouth tightened slightly. "There are options." "What options?" Callum leaned forward. "Selling would be cleanest, but Dad thinks there might be a way to restructure first." My mother gave him a look. He ignored it. "Restructure what?" I asked. My father's voice cooled. "This is why we wanted to talk in person. You hear one word and tense up. I'm asking what it means." "It means," he said slowly, "there may be a way for the house to support the family without an immediate sale. Support the family." That was how they said things, when they wanted one person to carry the weight quietly. My mother put her hand near mine, not touching it. "Your grandmother loved all of us," she said. "She would not want that house just sitting there while people she loved are struggling." I looked at Callum. His jaw moved once. "What struggle?" I asked. Callum laughed under his breath. "You wouldn't get it. Try me." My father gave him a warning glance, but Callum was too restless to stop. "I have a financing window," he said. "It's temporary. There's a deal attached to the river unit, and if I don't stabilize one part of the portfolio, the bank gets difficult." The words sounded practiced. Portfolio, stabilize, financing window. My father tapped his finger once against his folder. "Callum has obligations," he said. "Real ones." I felt the old sentence rise inside me, "So do I." But I did not say it. I looked down at the table instead. My mother had used the white plates again. The good ones, the heavy silverware, a staged piece. "What does Grandma Elise's house have to do with Callum's financing?" I asked. Marlene inhaled softly, like I had been rude. "Noella, it's a fair question." My father's eyes sharpened. "It is a family question." "No," I said quietly. "It's a property question." The room changed a little. Not much, just enough. Callum stopped bouncing his knee. My mother's hand pulled back. My father looked at me for a long second. I could see him deciding whether to be patient or offended. He chose patient. "Noella, you've always had an emotional attachment to that place." "We understand that," Callum muttered clearly. My father continued. "But emotional attachment is not a plan. What plan did you have?" He opened his folder and took out 2 pages. "Not enough for a full contract, enough for pressure." "These are preliminary documents," he said. "Nothing final." My pulse moved once, hard. I kept my hand still. "What kind of preliminary documents?" "A financing review," he said. "Connected to the house? Connected to the family's overall assets?" "That's not an answer." Callum sat back. "God, Noella." I turned to him. "Did you submit Grandma's house as collateral?" He looked at my father. That was the answer before anyone spoke. My mother's face tightened. "No one is trying to hurt you." I didn't ask that. My father's patience slipped. "You are not equipped to manage this level of complexity." There it was. Plain now. Not hidden under concern, not softened with sweetheart. Just this old story put on the table beside the chicken and untouched vegetables. I breathed in slowly. "What was filed?" I asked. My father blinked. What paperwork was filed?" "Noella, who authorized it?" He stared at me. I heard the refrigerator humming from the kitchen. A car passed outside, headlights sliding briefly across the front window. My voice stayed quiet. "Was my name used?" Marlene stood halfway, then sat again. "This is exactly what your father meant. You're turning this into something hostile. I'm asking specific questions." Callum's face flushed. "Because you want control." I looked at him then. Really looked. The expensive watch. The restless fingers. The phone face down like it might light up with bad news. The way his confidence was starting to thin at the edges. "No," I said. "I want to know what you did." My father stood, not dramatically. Just enough to make the room rearrange itself around him. "I will not be interrogated in my own home." I looked at the dark green front door beyond the hall. Not this door, I thought. Not the one that opens for belonging. My father picked up the 2 pages and placed them back in the folder. "We have handled this for years," he said. "While you were living in that little studio, worrying over rent receipts, I was making sure your grandmother's property didn't fall apart." The words were meant to shame me. They almost did. Then my ankle touched my bag under the table. The manila envelope was there. My copies, my questions, the clause with my name. "Maintenance and preservation," I said. My father's expression shifted, just slightly. "What did you say?" I looked up at him. That's what the trust says, doesn't it? The silence after that was different from all the others. My mother's lips parted. Callum looked from me to my father. My father did not move. Then he smiled once, very small. I don't know what you think you've read. I know enough to ask why you didn't tell me. Marlene's voice shook now, but not from grief. Who put this in your head? No one. You went digging, Callum said. I looked back at him. Someone sent me a property inquiry letter. He went still. That was the first real mistake he made. My father saw it too, his jaw tightened. Before anyone could speak, there was a knock at the front door. 3 sharp knocks. The same kind of knock that makes a room stop pretending. My mother turned toward the hall. Are we expecting someone? Nobody answered. My father looked irritated, but beneath it I saw something else flicker, not fear yet, calculation. He walked to the door. The rest of us sat there, listening. The latch turned. The door opened. A low voice spoke. Raymond Forbes? Yes, I have a delivery requiring receipt. Paper shifted. My hand closed around the edge of my chair. My father came back holding a sealed cream envelope. For a second, the scene looked almost ordinary. A man with mail, a family at dinner, a house that smelled like roasted vegetables and polish. Then my father looked at the return address. His face hardened. This is unnecessary, he said under his breath. He tore the envelope open with one finger. My mother stood now. Raymond? He unfolded the notice. His eyes moved quickly at first, annoyed. Impatient. Then slower, the paper lowered a fraction. He read one line again, then another. The color left his face. I had seen my father angry. I had seen him disappointed. I had seen him smug, tired, amused, irritated, and cold. But I had never seen his confidence drain out of him while he was still standing. His thumb pressed into the page so hard the paper bent. Callum pushed back from the table. What is it? My father did not answer. My mother came closer. Raymond, what does it say? He looked at the top of the notice, then at me, not like I was fragile. Not like I was confused. Like I had become a locked door he had assumed would always stay open. I already knew before he said anything. Still, when he turned the page slightly, I saw it. Addressed to Noella Marie Forbes. Below that were the words protected beneficiary and unauthorized action. Then final notice. Then a deadline. Then formal review. The room became very quiet. Even Callum did not move. My father read further, and with every line, his face changed. The notice confirmed what Ms. Alvarez had warned me about. Any attempted refinancing, lien, transfer, or collateral claim involving 14 Wexley Lane required my consent. Any action initiated without authorization had to be withdrawn by the stated deadline. Failure to comply could trigger review of prior submissions, signatures, and supporting documentation. It was not emotional, that was the strange part. The notice was calm, legal, specific. Everything my family had always claimed I could not be. My mother reached for the back of a chair. Callum whispered, Dad, my father's eyes stayed on me. For a moment, nobody spoke. The dining room clock ticked behind him. The good plates sat untouched. The folder beside his chair looked smaller than it had before. Finally, my father lowered the paper. His voice came out quiet. Noella, he said. What have you done? I looked at the envelope in his hand. Then at the folder he had brought to the table. Then at my mother, who suddenly looked less wounded than afraid. Then at Callum, whose phone was now in his hand. I did not raise my voice. I did not smile. I only said, I think the question is what you tried to do. For a few seconds after I said it, nobody moved. The sentence stayed between us. I think the question is what you tried to do. My father stared at me like he was waiting for the room to correct itself. Like if he stood still long enough, I would become the daughter he knew how to manage again. Then his hand tightened around the notice. You've been hiding things, he said. His voice was low. Not loud, that made it worse. I looked at the paper in his hand. So have you? My mother made a small sound, almost like my name was caught in her throat. Noella. I turned to her. She had one hand on the back of the chair. Her eyes were wet now, but it was not the same crying I remembered from Grandma Elise's funeral. This was quicker, defensive, almost startled. This didn't have to be ugly, she said. I nodded once. I agree. That seemed to hurt her more than if I had argued. Callum pushed his chair back farther. The legs scraped against the floor. Can someone tell me what this means? My father did not answer him, so I did. It means the house can't be used for your financing. Callum's face changed. Not all at once. First confusion, then calculation, then something close to panic. You don't know that. I do. He looked at my father. Dad, my father folded the notice, then unfolded it again. His eyes moved across the same lines, like maybe the words would rearrange themselves if he read them with enough authority. Raymond, my mother said, quieter now, what did you file? He turned on her. Not now. That was the moment I knew she had known enough. Maybe not the exact forms. Maybe not the whole plan. But enough to know Sunday dinner was not about conversation. Enough to help dress pressure up as family unity. I bent down and took the manila envelope from my bag. Nobody spoke while I opened it. I did not take out everything, just copies, the trust page, the clause, the inquiry letter, the note from Ms. Alvarez with the office number covered by my thumb. I placed the trust page on the table. My father looked at it like it was something indecent. Where did you get that? Public records, grandma's house. Legal aid. You had no right to go through private family matters. I looked at him. Private family matters? I asked. Or documents with my name on them? Callum stood now. This is insane. You don't even live there. My mother wiped under one eye. Your brother is under real pressure. I heard. No, I don't think you have, Callum snapped. I have deadlines. I have people waiting on me. That river unit doesn't just sit there because you're sentimental. There it was. Not memories. Not grandma. Not the blue door, the river unit. His voice lowered. You have no idea what happens if this falls apart. My father finally sat down. It was a small movement, but it changed the room more than standing had. He sat because the notice had taken something from him. Not money yet. Not reputation yet. Control. I looked at Callum. Did you list the house as collateral? His mouth opened, then closed. My father answered instead. It was preliminary. Without my consent. It was not final. Without my consent, I repeated. My mother's voice sharpened. You're acting like we were stealing from you. I waited a second before answering. You were trying to use something Grandma protected before asking me if I agreed. Her face crumpled at Grandma. I almost moved toward her. That instinct was still there, the old one. The part of me trained to soften when my mother looked wounded, even when she had helped create the wound. I stayed seated, she noticed. That hurt too. My father rubbed his forehead. For the first time that night, he looked older. You don't understand what I've carried, he said. I understand maintenance and preservation, I said. I understand that's what you were allowed to do. His eyes lifted. And I understand refinancing liens, transfers, and collateral claims required consent. The room went still again. Callum looked down at his phone. The screen had lit up. He turned it over too quickly. What happens now? He asked. I looked at the notice. Now you withdraw whatever was submitted. My father's jaw tightened. And if we don't, I let the question sit for a moment, not to threaten him, because I needed to hear that he was still trying to make this about power. Then I cooperate with the review, I said. My mother inhaled. Noella, don't say that like it's nothing. It isn't nothing. Then don't do this to family. That was the sentence I had been waiting for without knowing it. Do this to family, as if family meant I should absorb the damage quietly. As if family meant my name could be used after years of being dismissed. As if family meant Grandma Elise's last act of protection was something I should politely hand over because Callum had a deadline. I looked at my mother. Family should not require someone to disappear so everyone else can stay comfortable. She began to cry then. Not loudly. My father looked away. Callum grabbed and walked toward the hall. Callum, my mother said. He did not stop. At the doorway, he turned back. His face was pale now. If this tanks, he said. You know what that does to me, I said. No, he stared. Because no one told me the truth, I said. He left without another word. The front door opened, then shut hard enough to make the dining room light tremble. After that, there was no dramatic ending to the dinner. No shouting. No confession that fixed anything. No apology that made the years smaller. My father placed the final notice on the table and sat with his hand beside it. My mother cried into a napkin. I gathered my copies and put them back into the envelope. Before I left, my father said, "You're making a mistake." I paused in the hallway. For years, that sentence would have followed me home. This time, it stayed where he put it. On his side of the door, the review did not become a courtroom drama. Real life is usually more paperwork than fireworks. Ms. Alvarez helped me respond. The attempted collateral review was withdrawn before the deadline. A few submissions had to be clarified. One document had been filled out with language vague enough to make my consent look assumed, but not clear enough to hold once questioned. Callum's deal did not close the way he wanted. I heard that from my aunt, who called 3 weeks later pretending to ask about work. "Your father is very upset," she said carefully. "I know, and Callum had to restructure some things." I figured. There was a pause. Then she said, softer, "I didn't know your grandmother had arranged it that way." "Neither did I wanted to say. But that was not fully true anymore. Some part of me had known Grandma Elise loved with intention. I just had not known intention could be filed, witnessed, and recorded. My father called twice. I let both go to voicemail. The first message was stiff. The second was shorter. "We should talk." My mother sent long texts. Some were sad, some were angry. Some used words like misunderstanding and unity and hurt. I answered one. "I'm willing to talk when everyone can be honest. I'm not willing to be pressured." She did not reply for 2 days. That silence felt different from punishment. It felt like space. I went back to Grandma Elise's house the following Saturday. The air was cool, but the sun was out. I brought cleaning gloves, a small toolbox, a bottle of lemon polish, and a can of blue paint matched from a chip near the bottom of the old door. I did not move in that day. I did not stand in the middle of the living room and feel victorious. Mostly I swept. Dust gathered in gray lines along the baseboards. The kitchen window stuck like it always had, and I worked at it slowly until it lifted from the left side first. Outside leaves moved across the path. I cleaned the yellow kitchen table. I sorted the papers in the back room. I replaced one cracked switch plate. Small things. Practical things. The kind of love I understood now. When I opened the can of paint, the color looked too bright at first. Wet paint always does. But as I brushed it over the weathered door, the old blue came back slowly. Not perfect, just alive. A neighbor walked by with a dog and waved. I waved back with paint on my wrist. For a moment, I thought about my studio above the dry cleaner, the black binder, the rent receipts, the emergency fund that had once been $7. I had not been failing there. I had been surviving without becoming cruel. It took me years to understand the difference. By late afternoon, the first coat had dried enough for me to touch the edge lightly. The door was still rough in places. There were dents the paint could not hide. Old scratches near the lock. A small groove where the wood had swollen and settled through too many summers. I liked that. I did not need the house to look untouched. I needed it to be safe. Before I left, I stood on the porch with the key in my hand. The same key. The blue tag was worn almost smooth now. I could hear Grandma Elise's voice as clearly as if she were inside, moving around the kitchen, putting the kettle on. A person needs one door in this world that opens without them having to prove they deserve it. For a long time, I thought I needed my parents to open that door, to admit they had been wrong, to say they saw me, to say I had been careful, not incapable. But peace did not arrive as an apology. It arrived as a lock turning, as a window lifting. As my hand resting on fresh blue paint, I put the key in, the door opened. And for the first time in years, I stepped inside without waiting for anyone to decide whether I was allowed to belong.